Today we're going to talk about the summary and response writing assignment. This is building off of our last writing assignment, which was the summary. So the good news is you already know how to do part of this essay. A summary response is a very useful type of writing assignment to learn because we're going to be asked to do some version of this assignment in many different college classes. For example, you could be asked to summarize and respond to a piece of writing or poetry, a video or a movie or a TV show, a news story, or even a scientific study. So we're going to encounter this a lot, and it's good to know how to do it. As we learned in the last unit, a summary shows that we understood the original work by putting it in our own words and paraphrasing. And it also helps catch your reader up to speed. Now, what do I mean by that? Catching your reader up to speed. Well, take, for example, the idea of a movie. Let's say that you saw the movie Parasite and you want to explain your reaction to it or respond to it. I didn't see the movie, so before you can explain your reaction to it, you have to summarize a little bit about what the movie Parasite was about, right? Just the main points. This is why a summary is so important in a summary response essay. The reader has to know a little bit about the original source before they can even try to understand your response to it. The last part is the response, and this one is new for us, right? So a response is a personal reaction to the original source, whether that's a movie or an article or an essay, right? You can think of it like critiquing or evaluating, but it must be in the form of an argument of your own. So many students really like this because now is the time that they get to give their opinion and say their own ideas of what the article was about, whether they agree or disagree. Let's talk a little bit more about what are the qualities of an effective response. So first, as we said before, it focuses on your opinions, right? About the article or about the movie or about whatever you're responding to. So unlike the summary, you can give your opinion and you should give your opinion here. An effective response also examines ideas that you agree with or that you disagree with from the original, right? You can also point out the original writer's strengths or weaknesses in the logic of their argument. An effective response is also persuasive. Remember that your goal is to persuade your reader that your argument is valid and that your argument is strong. So it's really important that you present your argument in a really clear way so the reader knows what you're trying to argue, and that you support your argument. Just like in any other essay, we want to have really strong support. So we can do this by using facts, examples, and also, if you like, you can use personal experience. Many students like to relate things to their own personal experience or give a personal example in the response, which is fine, and it can be a great way to respond. But we also want to be careful with how we use our personal experience and make sure that after you give that personal experience, that you explain to the reader how this relates to your thesis or how this proves that your argument is true. That's something that I often see students forgetting. How to organize your summary and response. So there can be a few different ways that you organize the summary and response, but this is probably the most common way. And it's also the way that I suggest that you organize it for our class. So we're going to start with an introduction or a summary. This is going to look exactly like the last writing assignment. So do you remember how you introduced the title of the article or the movie, the author or who made it, the publication information, and then you just talked about the main points in the summary? Not opinion, not small details, right? It's going to be the same thing. So we'll do one paragraph for the introduction or summary. After that, you'll get into the body paragraphs. The body paragraphs I put in blue because these are your response, or in other words, your argument. This is where you put your opinion. So you're going to start body number 1 with a transition into the response. So you want to show some way to show your reader, hey, now we're going to talk about the response. I'm no longer summarizing. We need a transition to do that. And then we're also going to state, most importantly, your thesis or your argument. So what are your main points, whether you agree or disagree, or you found a mistake in the logic of the argument? That's what you want to put in body number 1. Now, body number 1 is going to be a shorter paragraph, right? Because we're not going into the explanation and trying to prove it yet. We're just going to present our argument. Body numbers 2 and 3 each introduce a new main supporting idea. Now, each of these supporting ideas has to support the thesis, right? Then we're going to add support, so examples, explanations, and details. For example, I said in body number 2, I would tell one thing that I agree with the author about. And in body number 3, I said one thing that I would disagree with the author about. Many times we'll do an agree and disagree, because many times we'll see something that we like about the argument, but also something we find to be a mistake or to be not entirely true. Right? The last paragraph is going to be a short conclusion. And just like any other essay, this just sums up the main points and leaves the reader with something to think about. Okay. Remember that all of the body paragraphs are going to be connected in some way, right? They all have to relate back to the argument. And we want to make sure not to forget to support with examples, details, and explanations. Okay. So sometimes it's a little bit easier to think about the organization by looking at an example. So I made an example of, this is not something from an article or a movie, but something from real life. I wanted something that we could really all think about and that we're going through right now, right? So for the introduction or summary, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what's happening at my gym. My gym has made the decision to stay open, even though the coronavirus continues to spread in the US, because it claims that people still need to work out and that they have asked anyone who feels sick to stay home, right? So these are the two main reasons they have decided to stay open, because people still need to work out and because they've asked people who feel sick to stay home, right? So notice this is no opinions here. This is just an idea of a summary, right? The next step is to tell my reaction, right? How do I respond to this summary, this fact that the gym has decided to stay open? So let's take a look at body number 1. Body number 1 in my thesis, I said, although I agree with my gym that continuing to exercise is important at this time, I disagree that asking people who feel sick to stay home will prevent the spread of the virus. So here you can see something I agree with and something that I disagree with, right, from the summary. My next step is to prove to my reader why my thesis is true. Why is my argument true, right? So body number 1 is going to explain why I agree with this statement that working out can relieve stress, and so it's important, right? So to support this, I might explain why. I might also give a personal example of a time that I felt really stressed out and that I went to exercise and it made me feel better and it calmed me down, and why it's very important to do nowadays too. Body number 3 is going to tell on the other side why I disagree, right? So I disagreed with the author, or with the idea that asking sick people to stay home is going to cure or prevent the spread of the virus, because I think it probably may not prevent the spread. And here in red, I have 2 supporting details to explain my position. So first, I said that older clients could be at risk because people who don't have symptoms can still pass the virus on to others, right? We've learned that people might not be feeling sick, especially if they're younger, but they might still be carrying the virus and able to pass it on. And the second reason I disagree with the gym's idea that asking someone to stay home if they feel sick prevents the spread is that some people might come to the gym even though they feel sick, right? And I could give a personal example of my friend who is obsessed with working out. She goes to the gym no matter what. And so even if she feels a little tickle in her throat, she'll still go to the gym. And I guess I'm just trying to prove here that not everyone is going to follow the rules that the gym lays out, and therefore people could still be at risk. Right? So again, I think that looking at an example kind of helps us to understand the organization. As you get into writing your first draft, you can also look back at this outline to see how you might organize your own. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the thesis, because the thesis for the response is something a little bit new, a little bit different, right? So I want to look at a few different examples, and as we look at each one, I want you to think about this question in the top right. Does the writer of each thesis agree or disagree with the original source? Okay. So the first thesis says, while I agree with Zinsser that these 4 kinds of pressure exist, I also think that there are new and different pressures today that he is neglecting. So as you think about this, you can pause the video because I'm going to give you the answer in just a minute. So you can pause the video and think about whether the writer of this thesis agrees or disagrees with the original source. Okay, so if you said that the writer of this thesis partially agrees, I think that's true. They agree that these 4 kinds of pressure exist, right? But the writer also disagrees in a way because they say that there are new and different pressures today that he is neglecting. So by using that word neglecting, he is neglecting, it's telling the reader that Zinsser, the original source, did not consider all of the pressure, or he's not exactly right. We can also tell by this word while, right? Using the subordinator of contrast introduces that I'm going to say 2 different things, right? One agree, one disagree. So I would say that this is a thesis that agrees, but also disagrees. Here's another thesis, and try to do the same thing. Does the writer of this thesis agree or disagree? You can pause the video while you think about it because I'm going to give the answer in just a moment. Okay, so once again, if you said that it is agree but also disagree, then you are correct, right? So the writer says, I can't say that fast food jobs are made for everyone. Probably this is the same idea as the original essay, right? Because then they introduce this fanboys, but I don't think that they are as bad as Etzioni's essay made them out to be. So this in red is what the author disagrees with from the original source. Okay, one very last one. This is a longer one, so take a minute. You can read it to yourself and pause the video. I'll give you the answer in just a moment. Okay, so this one, unlike the others, does not agree with the author at all, right? It starts out, in my opinion, the names of the teams are not meant to ridicule, exploit, or diminish the Native Americans in our society today. So these are probably the original author's main ideas, that the names of teams are meant to ridicule, exploit, or diminish the Native Americans. This writer of this essay has a different idea. They say, rather, the names are a symbol of pride and are only meant to bring positive outcomes to our society. So probably the writer completely disagrees with the original source. Okay? So I hope this gives you a little bit of an introduction to the summary and response. Feel free to look back, and you can also go through this PowerPoint on D2L yourself if you want to go at your own pace and look a little bit more closely at any of the slides.